we will get started. So Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. So basically, I need to make this smaller so I can see my notes. Hang on a second. Exit full screen. So we're going to sort of start on the biggest, most general things and get down to more specifics. And we talked very generally about cabinets last time, but basically cabinets are plywood boxes with doors and drawers and stuff in them, right? So there are two basic ways that you can make that box. Framed is one and frameless is the other, and the dark brown one on the left is the framed version, and then the yellow one on the right shows what a frameless box looks like. And framed is, it's a little bit easier to make. It's much more traditional here in the United States. It's more common in New England, and there are a lot more options at various price points than with frameless. Frameless is a little bit more of a finicky construction, so you don't really find sort of value in made to order frameless. It really starts at the price point of semi-custom and higher because you don't have that face frame for extra support. You really want good solid construction of your box. So that's why it's not really available in a lower price range. And frame cabinets consist of, in general, 1/2-inch plywood sides that are joined to a 3/4 inch thick by 1.5 inch wide solid wood face frame. And you can see that on the cabinet on the left. It sort of shrinks the opening looking into the cabinet a little bit. Sometimes at higher custom levels, they do use the 3/4 inch sides, and sometimes finished ends are 3/4, but in general at semi-custom and below, which is what most people go for, you have a 1/2-inch plywood side, and that's together with a face frame, that's structurally, that's fine structurally, especially when all joined together and installed together. That's pretty standard. Frameless cabinets, because they don't have the extra structural support of the face frame, you really want to choose a cabinet that has a 3/4 inch thick plywood side, and that's what I'm showing here. And because, as you know, when you slice through plywood, you see all of those plies showing through. Frameless cabinets have what's called edge banding on the finished ends of the finished edges of the plywood, the exposed edges. And that can either be a color matched PVC, which is a little bit less expensive, but it's very durable. And some cabinet lines have color matched to their standard colors in that, or it can be real wood and either painted or stained to finish, and that can be a little bit more expensive, but it looks just a little bit better because it makes the plywood sides look like solid wood when they have that edge banding on it. And why would you choose one over the other? Price is not really a factor. Once you get to the semi-custom or custom level, one is not more expensive than the other. So that's not a factor in choosing them. Sometimes you hear that frameless cabinets give you more interior space, and that's only partially true. The actual interior space of the cabinets is the same. The opening is a little bit wider because you don't have that face frame in the way. And what that really impacts most are the sizes of the drawer boxes, which you can't really see the measurements down below. I put a yardstick on it, but you can see that the brown face frame one, the drawer box, is a little bit smaller and it looks bigger on the yellow frameless one. Both of those bases are the same width. They're 15 inches wide, and you get an additional 1.5 inches of drawer width in a frameless cabinet than you would in the same size framed cabinet. This is really kind of most important for really tiny kitchens, like on a 12-inch or 15-inch drawer base. It can make the difference between being able to fit stuff and not being able to fit stuff. If you have a really large kitchen and lots of storage and lots of large drawer bases, I don't think this is really a reason to pick one over the other. But on a small kitchen, it can definitely make a little bit of a difference. To me, the major reason is aesthetic. There's something that's called reveal, which refers to the space between the doors and the drawer fronts. the reveal or the gap between doors and drawers is smaller on frameless than on framed. And this is like a more modern, clean look. A lot of people have regional preferences. You know, as I said, a lot of people in New England tend to choose framed cabinets, but a lot of my customers who are from urban areas where they use a lot of frameless, they tend to have smaller kitchens. So they really want to do, they really do want to maximize their drawer space. They tend to have a preference toward frameless over framed. But that, you know, really it's complete personal preference. They're both really solid ways to construct cabinets. And we'll talk a little bit more about different door styles later, but slabs tends to look a little bit better on frameless than it does on framed cabinetry because of those tight reveals. But for most companies, any door you want is available in either framed or frameless. So just because you're using frameless doesn't mean it has to look modern. You can put as traditional a door as you want on the frameless cabinet and still get the benefits of having the bigger drawer boxes, but a more traditional look. So we can go to the next slide, Fallon. And we'll start talking about overlays. And overlay simply refers to the amount that the door will overlay the face frame, or in the case of frameless, the edge of the frameless box. Full overlay is really the most common that we do. I think most of the kitchens we do are full overlay. Partial overlay, which we'll discuss a little bit later, was more common a couple of decades ago, and you find a lot of old kitchens that look like that. Most people tend to prefer the full overlay. It's a nicer, cleaner look than the partial overlay is. It looks a little bit higher end. Full overlay is the only option that is available in frameless. That is the only way that you can get frameless cabinetry. And it might be a little bit hard to see in this picture, but you can see in the full overlay, the gaps between the doors are a little bit bigger, whereas on the frameless, the gaps are a little bit tighter. I put them up side by side so that you can see that, but really the important takeaway is that full overlay is sort of the most common. It's available in both cabinet types. It's the only option if you're gonna go for frameless. So then the next slide. The next slide shows, so we have that full overlay framed cabinetry on the right again. And these are both Homecrest kitchens, Homecrest cabinets. These are the exact same shaker door style. So it just shows a little budget saving option that you have if you fall in love with a line and you love everything about it, the door style, the finishes and stuff like that. Often, not always, but often there is an option to save a little bit of money by going to a partial overlay. And again, full overlay refers to the fact that the doors and drawer fronts, not completely fully, but mostly overlay the face frame. In partial overlay, they only overlay it about a ½ inch. So on full overlay, what you get is not much face frame is revealed around the doors and drawer heads. But in partial overlay, you can see, especially in that big pantry, you can see some of the side frame is exposed. You can see some of the exposed frame between the top doors and the bottom doors. It's a little hard to tell because it's small, but there's definitely like a gap between the drawer front and the cabinets next to it, and also the door below it or subsequent drawers. So, but on a nice, clean, white painted shaker, it's really a minor aesthetic difference, and it's a good way to save a little bit of money if you're sort of in love with a cabinet line already. You can cut, you know, maybe 10–15% off the cost of the kitchen by going to a partial overlay versus a full overlay. And then we'll go to the next slide, please. This is going in the other direction. So I'm again showing another full overlay example versus what's called inset. And inset is exactly what it sounds like. The cabinet door, rather than laying on top of the face frame, is set into the face frame. So that's a very, very traditional and popular look in coastal areas like the Cape and Island. It's in that something's gotta give kitchen that everybody loved. Feels like a few years ago, but I think it was more than a few years ago now. And we do it especially in higher end homes. Like Frameless, they have very tight reveals in them also, because you don't want huge gaps between the doors and the face frame. That wouldn't look good. So we do only recommend inset in certain kinds of situations. You really need to climate control your house if you want to do inset. If you are just going to let the summer breezes and humidity come in all summer long, you're going to get some swelling and sticking, and your doors aren't going to operate properly. So you really need to climate control if you are going to use that as an option. So we can go on to the next slide. This talks a little bit about the hinges. The one on the left shows those old-fashioned exposed barrel hinges, and a lot of people like the look of that. It's not very practical. Those hinges have a couple of problems, especially in climates where you do get swelling and contracting. One is that they take up some of the space in the reveal and make it an overall tighter fit. But the other thing is they're not really adjustable. The other slide on the right shows concealed hinges, which just, you don't notice the hinges at all from the front side, but they use those modern Euro style hinges that you see on both regular framed and frameless cabinets, and they're adjustable 6 ways. You can use a screwdriver to just turn a screw, and you can raise and lower the door, move it from side to side, and move it in and out. And especially in frameless, especially in inset, where the face frames might swell a little bit, and even if you're climate controlled, you might need to make fine adjustments over time. It's really a much, much, much more practical choice to do concealed hinges, and we recommend that over the exposed hinge option for inset. And then the next slide. So the last thing to consider on inset is the frame style, and these are just a couple of pictures I took from my showroom, but the 2 options are beaded and non-beaded. It's just an aesthetic decision, and I don't even think in most of the manufacturers it really influences price. If it does, it's a little bit. Beaded has that little extra detail around the inside of the face frame, and then non-beaded is just a plain square face frame. Again, this is like purely an aesthetic thing. The one thing to keep in mind is that if you want to do the beaded, if you intend to include any arch details, like an arch top for an open bookcase or something, in the semi-custom and maybe even in the custom line, it's definitely impossible in the semi-custom to have that bead on an arch. It may be possible on a custom line, but it would be pricey. So you just want to think about that when you're making your decisions. If you're not doing any arches, as long as all of your openings are square, you could do beaded or non-beaded, whichever one you like. And the bead also provides a design opportunity in the custom level of cabinets where you can actually do that in a contrasting color if you want. So again, just some things to keep in mind when you're looking at different cabinet styles. So now we're going to look at door styles, and this is just the very, very basics of door styles to help you understand sort of what the choices are. But this is a great thing to just flip through a display and see what there is and see what you like. The first one is slab, which again, it is possible to have it on framed cabinet in certain styles, but it's most commonly found on frameless cabinets. And it's just what it says. It's just a slab, solid slab of material, no frame, no panel, nothing. It's very simple. And then we have a flat panel. I chose one that was a little bit fancier than the standard shaker that everybody likes, but we do a lot of shaker, and shaker is also a flat panel. It's just a basic flat panel and a basic square frame, sometimes with a little bevel in it, sometimes not. But it's often a very value price door, no matter what the price, no matter what price level you're at, no matter what cabinetry you're at. Usually the shaker doors are pretty inexpensive. And then there's a raised panel, which I don't do a whole lot of around here, but it's certainly appropriate for certain more traditional settings if you want something to really, really look traditional. The flat panel is kind of nice because it goes either way. Like the slab will always look modern, raised panel will always look traditional. Flat panel is what we call transitional, which it could go either way. If you decorate in a very traditional way, it's perfectly at home in a very traditional setting. But if you want a little bit bit of modern, but not too much modern. You can make some modern selections with hardware and countertop and tile and make it look a little bit more modern, but still warm and traditional. So I do mostly flat panel. It's sort of the most versatile of the door styles, but depending on what you like, there are other options too. And then just a very brief discussion on flat panel types. So when you have a flat panel door, it will always be flat on the front side, but if you turn the door over, you might notice differences on the back. And I just want to explain that a little bit. So the bottom blue one is actually the back side, not the front side of the cabinet, but it looks very similar to the front side. And that is a basic flat panel. It's usually a 1/4 inch thick panel. If it's wood, it will have a veneer on it. If it's paint grade, it will just be 1/4 inch thick MDF for painting. That's like at any level of cabinets. I don't know of any cabinet companies that are still using like solid wood center panels for paint grade. So that's sort of the least expensive. That's the basic. That's usually where we price things at, especially for paint grade. Back in the day when soft close hinge hardware was really, really expensive, it was like a pretty significant upgrade. Now it's not anymore. The technology has gotten much less expensive. Some people wanted to upgrade to a more solid panel because they didn't like the flimsy feeling. These doors are much lighter because the panel is not solid, and it's solid, but it's just very thin, and a lot of the weight is taken out of the door when you do that. But I find that if you have a soft close hinge, and soft close hinges are at least an option on all of our cabinet lines, if not standard, that feel kind of goes away because you don't really feel the weight of the door. The hinge is really taking the weight of the door. But that's something you might want to think about, just how it feels to you. You might want to upgrade to a solid panel if you don't like that. If you don't like that lighter feel to it. The other issue really with a flat panel is that it is in wood doors, it is veneered versus the solid wood of the frame. And not in all woods, but in some woods, this can make a difference in how it looks. It can make a difference in the graining pattern. So if you're looking at a wood stained door, you really want to compare side by side what a solid panel versus a flat panel looks like. A solid panel, the graining will match the frame, whereas a flat panel, depending on how they do the veneer, it can be a pretty good match, or it can be a match where it really looks quite different from the frame. So that's something to think about. And then the other two are just two solid panels. They're basically the same thing. It's a thicker panel, usually 5/8 thick. It's just two ways that you might see the back side of the door. Some of them use a square profile. Some of them use a little bit of a cove, so it looks like basically a reverse raised panel. It looks almost like a finished panel on the backside. But those are just two things you might see as you're flipping through display. They're both solid panels. And again, on paint, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, but on wood with a stain, you really want to make sure that you like the way the finish looks on a wood stain. So we can go to the next slide. And then another thing in the list of things to think about are what the drawer styles you want to look like. And again, this is the opportunity to personalize and have a design feature that reflects your own personal style. There are two basic types of drawer fronts. One is a slab, and you can see those on all of the smaller drawers on the right-hand wood stain slide. And then there's what they call a 5-part, which is constructed like a door. The 5-part refers to the 4 parts of the frame, the top, bottoms, and the sides, and then the panel. That makes 5 parts. So the least expensive option will be slab, and some of the less expensive cabinet lines, you only have slab as the option. Some of them you have an option to upgrade to 5-part for an additional charge. It really just depends on what you're choosing. And then from semi-custom and above, 5-part is sort of the standard. You can swap it out for a slab at no charge, and you can do a mix of slab and 5-part at no charge also, semi-custom and above. So the slide on the right is showing a combination, and this is sort of my favorite way to handle it is to do a slab for smaller drawers, and then for larger drawers, as you can see in that 4-drawer base all the way to the right, that bottom drawer, that's a lot of real estate for just a slab. Which is fine if you like that cleaner look. That's like an aesthetic choice. But I like to do those as 5-part when they get tall enough so that it looks a little bit more like a door. If you look at the slide on the left, you can see that those are all 5-part drawer heads. And you can see what happens, especially in inset, where the drawer fronts are smaller because they're inset into the face frame, they're kind of shrunk down, is that the top and bottom rails are shorter than what you would see in a typical door. And again, this may not bother you. You may like how it looks or you may hate how it looks, but it's just something to be aware of. You can see that in that dishwasher panel where there's like a full-size door on the bottom that has full-size top rail, and then the drawer head above has a shortened top rail. And then also something that sometimes happens is that if you're doing a raised panel is if that center panel is too small for a raised panel, you'll get a flat rather than raised panel, and you can see that combination. So there's lots of different combinations. It's less of an issue at lower price. You may not have a choice, but again, at semi-custom and above, you have some choices about this, so it's just something to think about. And then finishes could completely be its own webinar. There's so much to discuss with finishes, with the various lines and everything, but I'll just give you a couple of things to think about. There are 4 basic categories when it comes to finishes. Man-made most often happens in slab, and man-made is not necessarily a bad, cheap, inexpensive things. There are some really beautiful high-end man-made finishes. There's high-gloss acrylic if you want that kind of a look. There are some beautiful, really, really low-sheen laminates that, again, it's a high-end finish. It's not a cheap plastic thing, but you can achieve actually a much lower sheen than you can even achieve with paint or stain, and it's like super matte. Some really beautiful colors. They also make some reconstituted wood veneers. If you love the look of those exotic rainforest woods but are not like crazy about the deforestation and the environmental impact, there are some man-made options that replicate those really beautiful like that can really, you know, add a modern touch. So there's man-made options, usually in slab door styles. Usually we use them in frameless. Wood is a traditional option. We don't do that much stained wood anymore, but you know, there's still, I still do a decent amount of it. Some of the least expensive woods are your plain sawn oak, which is sort of that honey oak builder grade, but it can look nice with a more modern, up-to-date stain. Like as you can see in this, that sesame color is like a really pretty, more modern color. It's not, it doesn't have a lot of yellow tones in it. It's like, it's a warm tone with maybe a slight bit of gray to it. So there are some really pretty updated stains that you can get even in the less expensive woods. Hickory is a really rustic looking choice, but it can be really, really pretty, especially with a nice stain on it. And pecan are sort of the 3 base woods that don't carry an upcharge. Then if you want to do quarter sawed oak, which has that really pretty straight grain that looks like Craftsman style, that's available in an upcharge. Maple, cherry, and walnut. There might be a few other options, but those are sort of the basics that you find as far as woods go. In addition to what I mentioned about the flat panel door style, the other thing to keep in mind with wood is that even if you put a stain on it, the color of the finish can change over time with exposure to light. All woods do this a little bit. Maple can turn a little bit yellow over time. The 2 biggest offenders are cherry and walnut. Cherry goes very kind of reddish orange, and walnut can actually bleach out and turn a very yellow color. So you really need to think about how much sun exposure your kitchen is going to get and do a little bit of research about that. Talk to your designer and think about whether you'll still be happy with your wood product after it's been installed, especially if you have a lot of natural light. And then painted finishes are the most common. They're really the most popular. all of even the less expensive cabinet lines have some really beautiful up-to-date choices. They have several choices of white, and then there's gray is really popular, and they have at least usually one gray. Navy and black are two popular colors that are used as accents, and even those less expensive lines have, you know, some really, really nice color choices for that. And then once you get up to semi-custom, you have the option to do, it's called a custom color match, but it's not really custom. You can choose your Benjamin Moore or Sherwin-Williams paint color. And that just gives you a huge palette of colors to choose from. You can really put your personal stamp. It's not a huge upcharge to do it. It's only 5% more than standard paint to do that. And it's really, really a beautiful option to be able to just pick your color. Or what some people like to do is also to make their project look more custom is to choose the same color as their trim. So if your architect has specified Benjamin Moore white dove for all of your trim, you can have your cabinets painted white dove. You don't have to sort of look through the standard whites and pick the closest. You can have it painted in white dove. And then there are specialty finishes, which again, there are millions of them, but if you just want to do some Googling, there are different ways to glaze over paint to give it a more, it is a hand-done finish when you glaze, and it gives it that hand-done look. There are different ways to distress. There are weathered looks over wood. There are a ton of specialty finishes, and most people don't want to do an entire kitchen in a specialty finish, but it's great for an accent piece or a hutch or an island or something like that. And then we can move on to the next slide because I think I'm going over a little bit. So when thinking about door styles and thinking about finishes and thinking about overlays, one important thing to just think about is mixing it up a little bit. Inset overlay, all of the doors, because they're so precision fitted, have to be hand fitted in the factory to make sure it fits inside the face frame. So inset carries an upcharge over full overlay. It's just a much more labor intensive process to make those cabinets. But if you look at the slide on the right that shows a kitchen that I did where they really like the look of inset, but they didn't have the budget to do the whole kitchen in inset. So what we did was we did just a basic full overlay in a neutral white that kind of fades to the background, and then we did some inset in a two-tone accents. So you can think about that too. If you really love the look of inset, but you just don't have it in the budget, you could do like a hutch or, you know, a focal point in the inset and keep everything else kind of more basic and functional. And then the slide on the left just shows sort of mixing up finishes, and also it's a little hard to tell because it's blurry in the background, but the background is like a basic shaker in cherry. And then the island is more of a furniture piece. They're actually using a raised panel in paint. So don't be afraid, like if you like raised panel, but you think a whole kitchen of it might be too much, don't be afraid to think about just using some of these more expensive and less common stuff as accents rather than doing your whole kitchen in that. And then the next slide. So the last slide, storage, again, we're going to go into much more detail next week about storage. I just wanted to mention it and show sort of the three most common things that tend to show up in all of my kitchens. Rollout trays are a really good way to make your cabinets more functional and keep from having to like get on your knees and dig at what's in the back of the cabinet. And it's basically a dovetail drawer box on drawer slides, but they're behind cabinet doors. And the reason some people might use that over just using drawers is you have more flexibility in mounting height. You can mount them higher or lower, whereas drawers are the size they are and they're mounted where they are. You can also just choose to do a rollout tray at the bottom and a shelf on the top. You can kind of combine it every way, but that's a very common storage addition that I do. And trash pullout is probably even more common. I don't remember the last time I did a kitchen without a trash pullout in it, and I love the trash pullouts. People love them. Nobody wants to look at their trash, and it's nice and put away, and you can fit a double in a standard 18-inch base. Even the least, no matter how inexpensive the cabinet line is, they all have trash pullouts. And the double fits in an 18. They're standard size buckets with standard that take the standard white trash bags, and you can do your trash in and recycle, and it's a great thing to have. And then I also like to include a cutlery divider. it's like a really nice high-end looking touch that doesn't cost a whole lot. It costs like a few bucks to put it in, and it just, I think it's a really beautiful way to outfit your cutlery drawer. So we'll talk, there are so many options for storage, and we'll talk a lot more about that later. But now I'm going to shut up and pass it on to Becky to talk about countertops.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to get into some of the details of the different types of countertops that are available to us and that we use quite often. The first one is wood countertops. They're typically used on an island application or furniture tops such as hutches or bars or desks. There are various wood species available from your traditional oak and maple butcher block, which are most commonly used in kitchen applications because of their durability and the hardness of those wood species. They're done typically with a food-safe oiled finish, such as a mineral oil, so it has basically more of a matte finish that can be applied periodically to protect the wood and keep it from drying out. A butcher block style top is made to use for food prep and cutting on. The nice thing with wood is that if anything happens to it, it could potentially be sanded down and refinished if necessary. There are also other more exotic woods like teak, walnut, cherry, and butternut available. And one of our fabricators that I use frequently out of Connecticut, they offer color matching, which is available to match, say if you had wood flooring in your house that's existing or a piece of furniture that you wanted to try to match. It's a great way to customize a new countertop in your space. We're also seeing a lot of reclaimed lumber being used, going along with the trend that we spoke about in the previous webinar, using different materials together within the same space. I don't know if we had a picture of it, but one of the ones that we use, the fabricators that we use, they've been taking reclaimed lumber out of old buildings in Connecticut, such as a train station from the 18th century, and repurposing it as countertops. So the bottom slide is that actual piece of wood. It's Douglas fir, which a lot of times fir used to be used in flooring, but they've taken this out of that train station and you can get a custom countertop made. Another option that we have for the wood is with our coastal theme being on the Cape, they've gotten into the driftwood finish. That's the top right slide that you can see, that kind of gray driftwoody look. And then in the middle, it shows I believe that's a walnut countertop with a sink. So the nice thing too is that you can get what they call as a watershed finish. It's what you would see, say, on a sailboat in a galley, where you can actually have an undermount sink or even a drop-in sink. And with that finish, basically it eliminates the water from being able to penetrate the wood. So you can use it more like a regular countertop would, and you don't have to worry about it as much. The other slide, the top left slide, that's actually a wood desktop in an office that I did. So a lot of people are looking for alternatives to stone where you're using it in an office or say a table. It's not as hard of a finish, and it's a little bit warmer when you're sitting there eating or working. Next is laminate, otherwise known as Formica. We carry the two major brands, which is Formica and Wilson Art, for residential spaces. There are other brands available which we have access to through our various fabricators. They're typically more common in commercial spaces. Colors and patterns have come a long way since their inception. I like to call it not your grandmother's laminate anymore. There's hundreds of patterns to choose from, either solid colors, speckled, more modern patterns that emulate natural stone like granite and marble. They also get into the different textures where there is an actual texture to the countertop surface. So some of the wood looks, you can get a little bit of a wood grain to it. So basically disguises it from looking like what you're used to seeing in laminate. The top left slide where it says color, This is actually a Wilson Art kitchen laminate with an applied edge, and you can see the edge design on this slide. There's so many different edge treatments that you can get from the different fabricators. So it basically disguises it from looking like your typical laminate. I think we're good with the laminate slide. Thank you. Next is molded style countertops, which are solid surface like a Corian or cultured marble. So cultured marble is available for bathroom surfaces only. It's made out of a combination of natural stone particles with chemically bonded polymers, which creates a surface that's easy to clean and it's mold and mildew resistant. Corian is its own separate entity. It is a solid surface. It's essentially a plastic and acrylic. The best part about this type of molded style countertop that you can see in the pictures is that it can be virtually seamless with the sink and the backsplash. And that's something we find a lot of the times people asking for, can my countertops be seamless? There are these type of products where it is possible versus say a stone countertop that the pieces of stone are only so big, so they have to butt them together and they cannot be seamless a lot of the times. So this is a great alternative for that. It's also something that you can use in a shower application. You can do it for a shower pan, the shower walls, seats, shelves, shower accessories. It's a great product because it is all molded in one piece. So instead of doing, say, a tile shower, you don't get into the issue of having to clean the grout where it is just all one panel surface. They're also non-porous. So again, with the mildew and moisture, they're completely resistant to that. So you don't have to worry about in wet areas that's going to penetrate this material. The beauty of Corian specifically and not the cultured marble is that it is completely repairable. That if it scratches, stains, burns, is gouged, basically they come in with the same material, fill it in, sand it down, and then when it's all said and done, you would never know that anything happened to it. So that is the beauty of a solid surface like a Corian, that it is fully repairable. Let's see, natural stone. So natural stone, I would say natural stone and quartz is probably what we use the most of in specifically kitchen applications, just because of its hardness and durability. And you can see in the slide, it gives a great comparison between the different types of natural stone, which is granite, marble, soapstone, and quartzite. Those are the most common that we use. All granites are not created equal, and some are harder than others. However, because they're found in nature, it is porous, so it can potentially stain. Same thing with the marble, soapstone, and quartz. So all of our fabricators that we work with and most in the industry, they're typically professionally sealing the material when it's installed. And some fabricators offer a lifetime sealer, so you don't have to worry about it yourself, because you should have it sealed or seal it yourself just about once a year to protect the stone and keep it from staining and anything else from happening to the surface of it. And that's, so just showing a couple different examples of the natural granite. And then we do a lot with doing different finishes on the perimeter of a kitchen and on an island. So the slide on the right-hand side just shows two different natural granites used in the same space to just kind of break it up. And then the other three different types of natural stone that we use are quartzite, which is not quartz. Quartz is a man-made material. Quartzite is from nature, soapstone, and marble. Quartzite is great because it has similar properties to the granite, being as hard as granite, but gives you the look of marble if you still want a natural stone without it being as porous or easily scratched as marble. Again, this should be professionally sealed, but I don't believe that they offer the lifetime sealers on the quartzite or the soapstone or marble, but that would be specific to whoever you use as a fabricator. This one that's shown for the quartzite, it's called Fantasy Brown with a leathered finish. This particular quartzite has been extremely popular on the Cape and the islands because of its likeness to the beach and ocean, and it goes very well with just about any color, whether it's stained cabinetry, painted. It's a very versatile stone. The middle part of this slide is the soapstone. Soapstone is very dense and non-porous, which is unlike any of the other natural stones. And it can stand up to acidic materials and chemicals, which is why it's been used in laboratories such as school science labs, which you would see when you were at school, the dark black countertops. It is one of the only natural stones that is actually heat resistant as well, which is why it's commonly used for fireplaces. And although it is durable, it can scratch easily, but it can be easily taken care of with a low abrasion Scotch-Brite pad and some water with an application of mineral oil on top. And the mineral oil should be applied frequently within the first year after it's installed. And it will also maintain the darker color to the stone when it's applied over time, because normally soapstone, before it's treated at all, is actually a light gray, which most people don't know that because typically you've seen it oiled over time. So it has a very dark green or a dark gray or almost a black appearance. On the right-hand part of the slide is marble. Although it is beautiful, we do not recommend marble for the kitchen because it is extremely porous, so it can stain very easily, and it can scratch very easily without really being able to repair it once that does happen. So the man-made quartz materials are a better alternative if you love that look for a kitchen or even for any space, because they're not porous and they're scratch resistant, so you can get that look of marble. That being said, because natural stone is just beautiful and it's from nature and nothing can really compete with it, I usually try to recommend marble for a bathroom since there isn't as much in those spaces that can stain or scratch it, as far as food, wine, utensils, etc. And then quartz is a man-made slab out of quartz mineral. Typically the slabs are 90 to 93% ground quartz, which just depends on the manufacturer of it. Ground quartz, pigments, and bonding agents, and the pigments are what they're able to use to give the various colors. They call it kind of like a cookie dough mixture, and that's how it gets mixed up in basically a giant cookie dough mixer to create the different patterns and colors and all that stuff. We carry all of the major brands of quartz, and 3 of them are shown here. LG, Viaterra, Cambria, and Silestone are the 3 top brands that we use the most. There are various other ones. The material is heat, scratch, and stain resistant, which makes for great application pretty much anywhere. Just keep in mind, even though it has those properties, it is not indestructible by any means. So just keep that in mind. And we always do recommend on any type of surface, even if it's heat resistant, to try to use a hot plate if you can, especially around the stove, because what can happen over time is that the finish could be affected, and also the bonding agents, the pigments in that type of stone that's man-made, those could be affected by heat. So just keep that in mind. Again, these products have come such a long way since their inception, where they used to just be little speckled patterns, to those that are looking more and more like the natural stones, like the Silestone one on the right. You can see that has that look of soapstone, and basically you don't get into the maintenance of natural soapstone. So it's a great option for that. Edge selection is definitely a big part of your countertop process. On the left-hand side of the slide, it shows the pretty standard edge selections. The top row, the pencil, the round, the bevel, and the 3/8 round over. Those are the pretty standard ones that typically do not have any charge associated with them. And then anything more detailed, they typically charge a lineal foot price for those. The top right slide has, I'm not sure exactly which one this is, but it's got a more detailed furniture edge. A lot of times people don't want that for the entire kitchen, so we'll do it on the island, which we kind of see as a separate piece of furniture most of the time. So that's something where you can really jazz that up. You can do in the bottom right picture is actually a built up mitered edge. So that looks to be probably about a 3-inch thick edge with a waterfall where it basically falls off the side of the island and typically goes down to the floor. So this is a more contemporary look that we're seeing a lot more of. And you can actually make the edge of it pretty much as thick as you want to, because they miter the pieces together and they build up that edge. So the material itself is not that thick, it's just that they build up the edge. And typically for most stone countertops, they're usually 1.25 inches is the material thickness. And then you can get that mitered edge with a beefier, more substantial look to it. So like I said, they're usually 1.25 inches thick to 1.5 inches thick. And then they can also be milled down to a 3/4 thickness. I don't know if there's another slide, Fallon, with any more edge details. Okay.
That's nice.
So again, the left-hand slide has a more furniture edge on an island. The one in the center is your typical just 1.25 inch thickness of stone. And then the right-hand picture, again, shows that waterfall edge. That's a little bit more contemporary look. All right, I think we have a little bit of time for backsplashes, because obviously this is a big part of your kitchen selection and countertop selection. The most common that we do is, I would say, tile these days. So the top right, where it says tile, it shows a stone countertop, and you could use any countertop without a matching backsplash, and then you can pick pretty much any tile. This is where you can get really creative. In this one, we have a local tile company that does, you know, a map of Cape Cod, or you could pretty much have them paint anything on that. So you can really make that space your own. Another option for going up the entire wall, the top left slide where it says full granite is actually a full height matching stone backsplash. So that's where you have the backsplash goes from the countertop all the way up to the cabinetry, and you can even go farther up. If you have an exposed hood, you could go all the way up to the hood and beyond. So that actually has the same material on the countertop and all the way up the wall. So it can be a really stunning look, and I've had a lot of people do it, say, just behind the stove, where they just wanted it as an accent piece. And then another common one is just to do, say, a 4-inch backsplash up the wall that matches the countertop, and then you would just have your painted wall showing. Bottom left shows some more tile backsplash, just glass tile on top of stone. And typically in a bathroom, we're just doing a matching, say, 4-inch backsplash in the same material as the countertop. But on this slide, the bottom right, it actually shows tile backsplash, which it's not as commonly used, but it's definitely an option.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us for that. Thank you, Lisa and Becky.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to open it up for questions. So if you have anything you'd like to ask, either a broad question or a specific designer, feel free to unmute your microphone and join us and ask.
Hi, it's Eve.
Hi, Eve.
Becky, hi. You know what? You really got my attention with that quartzite fantasy brown. It looked like it was white and gray.
No, it's actually, I have it in my own kitchen and it has whites and grays, creams, browns. Some of it can even have seafoam green throughout.
Mhm.
So you can really put it with a lot of different finishes, and that's what makes it so versatile. And it's actually not that expensive.
Well,
So great,
that sounds
great
like
countertop.
really recommend that. It
Yeah,
sounds good. Yeah, it looks really nice. At the store, can we come in and see these sorts of options, or the different colors and quartzite and quartz and etc. Cambria?
absolutely.
You keep a big selection.
Yes. So
Okay.
we have a showroom in Orleans, a showroom in South Dennis, one in Middleboro, and then also one on Martha's Vineyard.
Okay.
And they're all fully stocked with all kinds of displays that shows cabinets, countertops, tile, basically one-stop shopping for everything that you need for the project.
Okay, great. I will email you later, but I got to run to another Zoom meeting, believe it or not.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
You're welcome.
Bye now.
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me for a question? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. Nice job, by the way. My question I have is, I have a kitchen currently. I've got 2 counters and an island, and it has a cherry butcher block, which I shellac over. Somebody else did, actually. My question would it be unusual to remove the cherry butcher block from the island and use something else, for example, quartz that would maybe match the cabinetry, which happens to be like the oak maple type color?
Absolutely. Because obviously the wood doesn't hold up as well as a stone. So you could certainly do that. I've had where people have, say, their perimeter they've done already in stone, but they had something like you have where you've got a wood countertop on the island. Sometimes we can match what you have on the rest of the kitchen, or you can do, something completely different in a different type of stone if you want.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then that caught my attention is the people that you have that can design a section of like a subway tiled backsplash that you could insert in a particular area.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds really good. I'll have to get a hold of it and maybe look into that, because I'm thinking of doing some of the subway tile backsplash in the near future anyway.
Okay, yeah, they can do, I think, pretty much anything you can come up with can be done in a section of backsplash. And I think you can pick from different types of tile, sizes, shapes, and stuff like that. It's
Yeah,
not limited to just, say, the map of Cape Cod.
yeah, that's good. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I think Jonah had asked a question in the chat. I just wanted to address the next week's webinar is on, it's going to be titled this storage versus open concept paradox. So we'll touch on some storage elements within drawers. I'm not sure if there was something specific you wanted to ask. Maybe Lisa would like to address further the drawers. I'm not sure exactly what you're looking to hear about.
Well, most of the cabinet lines, even the value stock lines, use undermount slides nowadays. The hardware has come far in technology and come down in price. I don't think I have ever sold a kitchen that used a side mount slide. Most of them have the full concealed undermount slides. There might be that option in some of the midline grades where you can get the side mount slides but then upgrade them. That might be an issue in some aftermarket things that you add. I know I added like a pot lid pull out, and I think that had side mount versus the undermount, but we can talk about that a little bit next time. We can add that to the agenda. But for basic drawer boxes, I think pretty much all of them are using the undermount with the dovetail box now and not the side mount glides anymore.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, I think that we will wrap up then. We made good time there. And I will be sending out a follow-up email, and it does take a few minutes to convert this recording, but I will include this and the YouTube link to the previous webinars as well. So thank you all so much. And
Yes, thank you.
we look forward to seeing you again next week.
All right.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you, guys.